We begin with Prime Minister Mark Carney's European tour. He's in Latvia today after stops in Poland and Germany. It's part of Canada's push to diversify trade and economic partnerships amid a trade war with the U.S.
They've got some deals done.
As Prime Minister Mark Carney visits Mexico amid ongoing tensions with the United States. New polling shows more than half of Canadians say their trust of Americans is broken.
Canada just stabbed Trump in the back with a German gas deal. And instead of a power play, it's blowing up like a live grenade. Carney strutted into Berlin waving contracts like Canada had finally broken free from America's shadow. But the truth is, way uglier. The second you peel back the headline, you see a deal built on U.S. pipelines, German doubts, and a political storm that Carney never saw coming.
Prime Minister Mark Carney is in Germany this morning, where he announced a new critical minerals partnership. In announcing the deal, Prime Minister Carney said for too long, Canadian minerals have been sitting in the ground while countries like Russia and China dominate the market. This new partnership will see Canada and Germany work together to encourage new natural resources projects.
Carney's so-called masterstroke was an 8-year gas contract between Canada's Tourmaline and Germany's Uniper. 80,000 MMBtu a day. That's roughly 234 billion cubic feet of Canadian gas tied to Europe's gold standard TTF pricing. On paper, it looked like Ottawa had finally broken free from America's grip and stepped onto the big stage of global energy.
So Canada needs some allies right now as we're grappling with this situation with the United States and the trade war. We know that Germany is buying millions of tons of LNG from the United States and Qatar, not Canada, as a result of really inaction by past governments on developing LNG.
But here's where the mask slips. There is no secret pipeline running from Alberta to Hamburg. That gas is funneled straight into Louisiana's U.S. trading hub and then shipped out through American LNG terminals. In other words, Canada doesn't have the infrastructure, the ports, or the muscle to move 1 cubic foot without the U.S. holding the door open.
Canada can play a role in accelerating that diversification for Germany and for Europe, and these issues are only going to become more important. There's likely to be a 4-fold increase in the demand for critical metals and minerals over the course of the next decade.
And yet, Carney strutted into Berlin selling it as Canada's big breakthrough. Please, that's not independence, that's cosplay. Ottawa is piggybacking off billions of U.S. investment and pretending it's a triumph of Canadian strength. Washington saw it instantly, and they're not laughing, they're furious.
First, Canada and Germany are going to have signed a critical minerals partnership that will see Canadian critical minerals produced and developed for export markets. Second, Canada and Germany say they're going to get serious about finding ways to export Canadian liquefied natural gas to German markets. Details TBD.
The backlash from Washington didn't take days. It hit within hours. U.S. energy lobbyists were the first to go nuclear. They poured billions into building those Gulf Coast LNG terminals, only to watch Canada waltz in, slap a maple leaf on the shipment, and call it a Canadian export. Them, Ottawa wasn't diversifying. It was freeloading.
Now, we have to be clear. We have to continue to be clear with Canadians that this won't always be easy. What's happening, as I said earlier, in the global economy, partly in jest, but this is serious now. What's happening in the global economy is not a transition. It's a rupture.
Then came the lawmakers. Voices on Capitol Hill blasted Carney for chasing prestige while America carried the infrastructure burden. Their message was brutal. If you want to play global energy supplier, build your own damn pipes. Instead, Canada jumped into Europe's market using U.S. systems, then tried to brand it as a homegrown victory.
The U.S. is fundamentally transforming all of its trading relationships, not just with Canada. The effect is profound. It's displacing workers. It's disrupting supply chains. It's causing immense uncertainty that's curbing investment and increasing unemployment. We're over the shock.
And the optics? Even worse. Carney basically walked Canada into the middle of America's energy showcase and claimed center stage without paying for the theater. Washington's takeaway was simple. Canada wasn't proving its independence. It was reminding the world how dependent it still is.
So we're getting ready for everything, especially also with a view to hydrogen on the longer run. But LNG imports we are doing already, so we are there. And I hope that Canada would also fulfill. But the decision if to send troops or not is not being taken in Germany yet.
And just Just when Carney thought Germany would shower him with praise, Berlin started looking sideways. Because let's be real, if your gas deal is running through Louisiana, then Canada's not in control. Washington is. German officials and Uniper were already whispering, okay, but what happens if US-Canada relations blow up? Do we still get the gas, or does it get stuck in some tariff war?
We are having with German companies that they do care about LNG, and we as the government certainly want to pave the way for any sort of imports, because as we said in the beginning, the diversification, especially in LNG imports, is of relevance to us as well.
Instead of stability, deals suddenly looked shaky. Europe wanted certainty after cutting ties with Russia. Not another supply chain with a giant political question mark stamped on it. And Uniper? They already had long-term contracts with American LNG producers. Now, Carney's deal just added more drama. Like, why gamble on Canadian gas if it's really riding on America's infrastructure anyway? So the supposed lifeline started to feel like a liability. Germany thought it was hedging its bets, but Carney basically handed them a deal that could unravel the second Washington gets cranky. And that's not diversification, that's doubling the risk.
Your critics are going to say that this is an elbows down approach, that you're backing down to Trump. What are you gaining by dropping these tariffs?
But there's also a time in a game where you want the puck, you want a stick handle, you want to pass, you want to put the puck in the net. And we're moving later into the game, and we're at that time in the game.
In Ottawa, Conservatives didn't waste a second. They hammered Carney for risking Canada's most vital relationship with the U.S. just to score a headline in Berlin, branding him a rookie who gambled the alliance for vanity. The NDP joined in too, pointing out the obvious. No LNG ports, no pipeline to Europe, no real independence. Carney had sold Europe promises he couldn't deliver. Instead of returning to Parliament with a victory lap, he walked in exposed, pushing sovereignty that was nothing more than dependence dressed up as triumph.
Canadians feel that their relationship with the United States has changed in a fundamental way.
And while trade negotiations continue, 71% believe the economic disputes with the U.S. will continue for years. By comparison, less than half of Canadians think Prime Minister Mark Carney will succeed in making a trade deal with the U.S.
And if you thought the politics were messy, wait until you look at the money. Carney bragged about tying the deal to Europe's TTF benchmark, the so-called gold standard for gas trading. Sounds glamorous, right? Wrong. That means Canadian producers are now chained to the wildest roller coaster in global energy prices. When TTF is sky high, sure, Ottawa gets to brag. But when it crashes, Canada eats the losses. That's not strategy. That's gambling with the economy.
Canada can play a role in accelerating that diversification.
In announcing the deal, Prime Minister Carney said for too long, Canadian minerals have been sitting in the ground while countries like Russia and China dominate the market.
Investors saw it immediately. Analysts flagged the fine print. Canada has zero control over the infrastructure, yet it's tied to Europe's volatility. And here's the kicker. If Washington slaps on new tariffs, raises access costs, or just decides to flex, those Canadian profits shrink fast. Margins get crushed before a single ship leaves port. Even Tourmaline's own leadership tried to spin it as fundamentals are strong. Please, the fundamentals scream risk. You're talking about a contract that looks bulletproof on stage in Berlin, but turns into a house of cards the second U.S. politics or global prices shift. And in the energy game, that's not a deal. That's a time bomb.
I will reiterate how much we welcome President Trump's openness to U.S. participation to help align with the work of the coalition of the willing.
Backed into a corner, Carney scrambled into damage control. He started dialing Washington to reassure them Canada values the partnership, while whispering to Berlin that supply would be stable. At the same time, he threw out a monster promise, nearly $500 billion for new infrastructure. He name-dropped everything from reinforcing the Port of Montreal, to building a brand new port in Churchill, Manitoba, to expanding East Coast gateways for liquefied natural gas and minerals. It sounded bold, but let's be real. None of it exists yet. These are PowerPoint slides, not pipelines. Carney tried to patch a political mess with blueprints and buzzwords, but the more he talked, the clearer it got. He doesn't have the infrastructure to back up the headlines.
Very concrete in terms of single projects which we wanted to undertake, but it opens the door, and we do have some support schemes both in Germany and in Canada, like a raw materials fund in Germany, which we will use for the benefit of our corporation and critical minerals.
And that's the real damage. This wasn't just one sloppy deal. It cracked Canada's image on the world stage. Berlin thought it was getting stability, but what it actually got was a supply chain that could collapse if Washington sneezes. Washington thought it was getting a partner, but saw a neighbor freeloading off its billions in infrastructure. And Canadians at home, they saw a prime minister selling them independence while hitching a ride on someone someone else's system.
Exposure to vulnerability, the vulnerability and instability is, I think, the norm in the global economy, global geopolitics, but countries like Germany, Canada, partnership with the European Union, can provide stability and prosperity for our citizens.
For Carney, the fallout is personal. He pitched himself as the polished technocrat who understood global markets better than anyone else, the guy who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Trump and prove Canada had muscle. Instead, he looked like a rookie who rushed into Berlin waving contracts without thinking through the consequences. He promised sovereignty and delivered dependency, promised leadership and delivered panic.
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations, is over. President Trump again imposed unjustified tariffs on our nation in violation of our existing trade agreements.
And now the question isn't whether this gas will actually flow. Probably will. The question is whether anyone in Berlin, Washington, or Ottawa still believes Carney when he says Canada is ready to lead. Because credibility is everything. And right now, his is leaking faster than the gas he tried to sell. Honestly, Germany wanted stability, but what they got was a ticking time bomb. Stick with us, the fallout is only beginning.